So, Matt, Israel is saying that this war is about Iran's nuclear weapon. So tell me, is it really about Iran's nuclear weapon, or is it about regime change?
Well, I think in simplest terms, it's about regime change, and that's clear. And Netanyahu's even said that. The nuclear program is a cover. And in fact, if you look at the evidence of whether Iran is trying to develop a nuclear weapons program, it's not clear they are at all. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard, who's the director of national intelligence in the Trump administration, she testified before Congress in March, and she said outright, we have no evidence that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon program. Trump has now sidelined her within the administration and said that he doesn't accept what she said. But there's been other reports by the intelligence community in America in 2007 and before that that show that Iran is not seeking to develop nuclear weapons. Also, there was a deal in 2015 called the Joint Coordinated Plan of Action, which was arranged by the Obama administration. It was called the P5+1, so it was the Security Council members plus Germany. And they did this agreement with Iran, which was very, very stringent on what Iran could do. They couldn't enrich above uranium above 4%. They had to dismantle centrifuges, which are used to enrich uranium. They had to open themselves up to an onerous regulatory and investigation regime under the International Atomic Energy Agency. And then everything seemed to be okay. And then in 2018, Trump came in. Under his new so-called maximum pressure policy, he completely cancelled the deal. And since then, they say that Iran has enriched uranium up to 60%. It needs to be up to 90% for a weapon. But many people say Iran are just doing that to get leverage, that they're trying to say, look, if we don't have another deal, we will create nuclear weapons. But again, the other point of it is Iran doesn't have any evidence that they're producing the other components of nuclear weapons, which is delivery systems, the missiles which are needed to carry them. There's no evidence at all. And a nuclear program is a very hard thing to hide. The IAEA, which oversees it, it would be very, very difficult to plan and enact a nuclear weapons program without them knowing about it. And they say that they also say alongside US intelligence that it isn't. So it's basically a cover to enact a plan that Netanyahu has had since he became prime minister in 1996 for the first time. He has seen Iran as the big regional threat. And Saddam Hussein as well, but Saddam Hussein obviously was taken out in 2003.
And Libya.
And Libya. But there's also a longer history of the Israelis bombing reactors of countries in the region. In 1981, famously, they bombed the Osirak reactor in Iraq and completely destroyed that. That was under Saddam Hussein. Illegally as well. It was condemned by the UN and other legal institutions. But it goes back to in 1981, the Prime Minister was Menachem Begin, who was one of the founders of Likud. He was also in the Irgun, which was the Zionist terrorist force which actually bombed the King David Hotel in 1946. But he ordered the destruction of Osirak and launched what is now called the Begin Doctrine, which is that Israel will not tolerate any nuclear powers in the region around it because they say it's an existential threat. There's also something that is called the Samson option, which is famous. It came out in a book by the same name by Seymour Hersh, the famous investigative journalist, in 1991. And that is a policy where they say that if Israel ever feels it's under existential threat, it will destroy whole countries and actually put themselves at risk by just creating a massive conflagration in the Middle East. So that's the context. But Netanyahu has obviously doesn't want them to have a weapons program. But as I said, there's no evidence they are developing one. But
if Iran is actually developing a nuclear weapon, does that give Israel the justification to go and bomb really Iranian facilities and Iranian nuclear facilities?
100% under international law. You can't just attack another country because they're doing something you don't like. And also the other thing is the incentive that many countries who are on the wrong side of the empire, the United States, Israel, UK, is to develop nuclear weapons because you need it as a deterrent, as a protection. North Korea has nuclear weapons and is actually not under the same kind of attack that it was before it developed those. So the incentive that the Western powers are creating is to develop nuclear weapons as a deterrent. But yes, and even if they were, there's no legal basis for Israel bombing them. And Israel itself has nuclear weapons.
So, Matt, tell me more about Israel's nuclear capabilities.
Well, Israel has a policy which is called nuclear ambiguity, which is that they've never confirmed or denied that they have nuclear weapons. But most established organizations which know about these things say that they have 90 nuclear weapons around, and with the capacity to quickly produce up to 200. Their nuclear weapons program began in the 1950s. They think it was completed by the Six-Day War in 1967. And also, Israel never signed up to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was created in 1968. It's one of only 4 countries which is not a part of the NPT, which is Israel, Iran, Pakistan, India, and North Korea. So it has no inspections by the IAEA. It has no oversight at all of its nuclear activities. It's producing plutonium. It's known at the Dimona reactor in Israel. And there was a big revelation in the 80s when there was a whistleblower from within the nuclear program in Israel, a guy called Mordechai Vanunu, who leaked a lot of information to the Sunday Times here in London. And he was under the protection of the Sunday Times in 1986 when the stories came out. And he was actually taken, where there was a honey trap which happened in London. He was taken to Italy, where he was then snatched and taken back to Israel, and he was under house arrest for many, many decades, and he still can't leave Israel. So everyone knows Israel has nuclear weapons. Everyone knows they didn't sign an NPT as well. So they are much more a rogue state on this issue than Iran ever is. Iran has allowed inspections, in fact, very rigorous inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency and others. And so it's completely contradictory, the whole thing. There's no reason that one state should be allowed them and another state shouldn't. No state should be allowed.
So why is Israel allowed to have a nuclear weapon and Iran is not?
Well, it's the law of the jungle. That's the world we live in. International relations, the powerful can do what they want and the weak must suffer what they must. There's no... Israel, in fact, is one of the countries that definitely shouldn't have nuclear weapons because they've shown that they have no ability or predilection to follow international law ever. And also... they
have no respect for human life.
No respect for human life. If anyone's going to set off a nuclear weapon, it would be Netanyahu. And there's rumours that one was set off in Syria recently as well. I don't know, that's unconfirmed. But the other point which is important is that the nuclear reactors that they are hitting in Iran, so Natanz is a major one which they've hit and damaged. The main one is Fordow, which is deep underground and would need to be softened up by the Israelis, but essentially would need a tactical nuke to be dropped by the United States by a B-52 bomber, which is not beyond the realms of possibility, I think. And that's largely why they want the US to get involved, because once the US gets involved, they've got the technology and the advanced weaponry that could bomb deep enough to get forward down.
How dangerous is bombing these nuclear facilities in Iran? I mean, let's assume that Israel or the United States will really bomb Fordow facility. Do you think that will be dangerous?
Of course. Well, it's highly radioactive materials would be just bombed out of the reactors. So that would be. But they don't care about this stuff. They didn't care about Osirak. They didn't care about it when they bombed the nuclear facility in Syria in 2007. They have no regard for any kind of human life, which is why it's always so galling to see Netanyahu go on TV and say, we love the Iranian people, we care about you, we want you to live in freedom. I mean, that's the opposite of the truth. They want them to live under a regime which oppresses them but supports Israel. That's effectively the thing. But I think it's hugely dangerous, and I think they will do it. But I think that it's clear that, as I said, the nuclear thing is a cover, although they want to destroy the nuclear facilities. But I think they're also working to create a uprising against the regime in Iran, which is taking all sorts of different avenues. One being to move 10 million people out of Tehran. They issued an evacuation order, which is a war crime, by the way, to move 10 million people. And then they're hoping that the displacement, the stress that's being caused, will create enough momentum that people will turn against the regime, and then they'll do Israel's job for it, because it's going to be hard to overthrow the regime without an invasion, and they're not going to do an invasion.
Yeah.
Or maybe they would with the United States, but I don't even think the United States would do it. Iran is a different kettle of fish to who they've been fighting with before.
What role does the United States play in this?
Well, the United States plays a huge role because the United States and Israel have common enemies. Iran has been an enemy of the United States since 1979. In fact, when they overthrew, the Islamic Revolution overthrew a US-backed dictator called the Shah. And actually the civilian nuclear program, which I think still is a civilian nuclear program, which every country has a right to, even under the NPT, at low levels of enrichment for scientific purposes for energy, that was started under the Shah, under the US-backed Shah. And since 1979, when they overthrew the Shah, the United States has been wanting to get rid of the Iranian regime, like they did with Saddam, like they did with Gaddafi, and they've launched all sorts of operations alongside the Israelis. I mean, one of the most outrageous ones they did in recent history is assassinating Qasem Soleimani in Iraq, who's the leader, who was the leader of the Quds Force, which is the external military wing of the IRGC. And he was assassinated in a drone bombing in Iraq, in a third country, a top military leader. That's international terrorism. There's no other word for it. Completely illegal. And the US, there's debate about whether Trump was just doing that on behalf of the Israelis or whatever. But whatever side you come down on that debate, it's clear that the US also wants Iran out of the picture as well. I don't know. It's an open question if how far they'd go without being pushed by Israel. I kind of think that they were, as was shown by Obama signing the Iran nuclear deal in 2015, which massively annoyed Israel, by the way. They did not want the Iran nuclear deal because they wanted to overthrow the regime rather than actually get a deal which would mean there'll be no nuclear weapons. Shows that Trump is a different kettle of fish because he's under the control of the Israelis to more of a degree than people like Obama and maybe even Biden. And the other point that's important mentioning about the Iranian nuclear weapon program is Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa in 2003, which said that nuclear weapons are haram within Islam. Now, you could say that was just rhetoric or whatever, but that chimes with actually US intelligence community reporting, which says that around that time the weapons program was, or any kind of weapons program was jettisoned. So I think that it is, when you start looking into it, when you start understanding the realities of this so-called nuclear weapons program, you realize it is all propaganda. Like they might want one now, and in fact they probably like if you were strategically thinking about how you'd stop your country getting attacked, you would need a nuclear weapon. But it's amazing that Trump can go on TV and just dismiss his own director of national intelligence, who spoke in March, dismiss the whole international intelligence community, which is meant to provide the information he's meant to act on, and just say, well, no, I don't think it's true. And he has no idea. What he's doing is ventriloquizing the Israeli position. And as I say, if they really want to destroy the civilian nuclear program in Iran, if they really want to do regime change, they're going to need the big boys, or the big boy, which is the United States. And it looks like they've got them on side. Seymour Hersh, the investigative reporter, published an article yesterday saying that a US attack on Iran will start this weekend. I don't know if that's 100% true, but he's basing that on sources within the government itself. So it's an ugly picture.
Why is Netanyahu and now the US are so opposed to Iran?
Because it's the one country in the region they don't control now. If you look at a map of the Middle East, look at what's around Iran, you've got maybe a dozen countries which are all under the control of the US and by extension the Israelis. There's 19 US military bases at least around Iran, 50,000 US troops, including Al Udeid in Qatar, NAS Bahrain in Bahrain, where the Fifth Fleet is. They're completely surrounded, and they took out Saddam, as I said. They've taken out Assad. They took out Gaddafi. Like it's the only state-backed supporter of the Palestinian resistance left. And that was kind of, as I mentioned, Netanyahu's plan from when he came into the 90s. He wanted to reconfigure the Middle East away from Iran. And how he wanted to do that was to normalize and become friends with the sort of Sunni countries in the Gulf. So the big one being Saudi Arabia, obviously, but UAE, Bahrain, Oman, and even during his first presidency, there was, I think, 5 countries signed the Abraham Accords, which was a normalizing agreement. They were going to have embassy. This was UAE and other countries signed it to have exchanges of diplomatic personnel and et cetera, et cetera. So this is what Netanyahu wants. He wants this kind of normalized Zionist Wahhabism in the case of Saudi Arabia, and to destroy the Iranian regime, which has a history of supporting the resistance movements to Israel. Now that goes for Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. So that's why Netanyahu doesn't want them. It's how empires work, and Israel is part of the American empire, and empires do not tolerate dissent and do not tolerate an independent foreign policy. And after 9/11, there's a famous clip of General Wesley Clark, who was a senior US military official after 9/11 happened. And he said that the policy within the Pentagon was, we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years and finish with Iran. And if you look at that list of countries, it's places like Libya, Syria, Iraq. They've taken them all out, apart from Iran. That's the last one left. It took longer than 5 years, obviously, but they're on that route to remake the Middle East. And Netanyahu said this after October 7th. It was a very, very scary or sinister moment when he went on TV and said, "Stay with us." Hang in there with us, we're going to remake the Middle East. This is his 9/11 moment. He wants to do everything he's been wanting to do since the 90s, and Iran is a key part of that. Who knows if it ends there, though? If they take out the Iranian regime, they might move on to Pakistan and Turkey. That you're seeing stuff in the Israeli press about who's next. This is a project which tolerates no dissent, and it's the Rottweiler of the United States in the Middle East. So it's also doing the dirty work of the United States.
Matt, thank you very much.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please like and subscribe to Palestine Deep Dive. And if you can, please donate as little as £2 a month for Palestine Deep Dive at palestinedeepdive.com/support.